Welcome, everybody. Please feel free to share in the chat where you're coming from and what you're hoping to, or how you're feeling, actually, I would say. How are you feeling? Like, where are you coming from and how are you feeling? That's what I want to know. But you can also share what you're hoping to get out of this session today as well.
I just popped in, so could you repeat what we are supposed to share?
Absolutely. I was saying you can share where you're coming from and how you're feeling today, or what you'd like to get out of our session or time together today.
I'm coming from Whitewater Grocery Co. in Whitewater, Wisconsin, and today I am feeling really tired, but glad to be seeing faces after watching webinars this morning.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm seeing some others sharing in the chat too. Feeling great, coming from San Diego, Vermont. Feeling inspired. It's been a great opening few sessions that I've attended. So I get that. And I'm feeling a blend of excitement and social anxiety. I feel that. It's definitely a different platform being online, and sometimes we're seeing each other, sometimes we're not. Feeling inspired and a little stressed. I hear you. Hope to learn more about organizing around values. Glad to connect with folks again, feeling good. Absolutely. And we have people coming from Detroit and Illinois, North Carolina, California, Wisconsin, more California, more Wisconsin.
You know, and you can say it's because it's a virtual conference, people can come from everywhere, but they did anyway when it was live and in person too. So it's really good to see some familiar faces and a few new ones here.
Absolutely. Hello from Seattle, from Southside Food Co-op Chicago. Beautiful. Well, I'm coming from Western Massachusetts. I live right outside of Amherst, Massachusetts, like UMass Amherst or Amherst College. And I'm feeling a lot of things. I'm feeling tired and overwhelmed. I am going on 29 weeks pregnant for the first time. And I am also grieving the loss of my grandfather from this last week. So there's a lot of things going on for me right now, feeling lots of excitement, lots of grief, a little bit of sickness. My morning sickness came back. So I'm sharing that with you all today to just give you an idea of where I'm coming from, how I'm showing up to the space. I'm really excited to be here. I really wanted to do this regardless of all the things that are going on with me. And I'm excited to be in the space with you all. Up and coming really impacted me a lot when I joined in last year for the first time. And so I'm really excited to be able to share with you all some of the things that I've been doing within my co-op that was inspired by the work that I saw happen at up and coming last year. Taking a deep breath. So yeah, I'll share my screen. So thank you for joining today. This is Disrupting Harmful Patterns to Build a Healthy Co-op Culture. And I am Kinga McCraven. I am the board president of Common Share Food Co-op out here in Amherst, Massachusetts, as well as the co-founder for Counterculture Educator, my business with my partner. And I mention that because the work that I've brought to the board is largely based in the culture shifting work that we do in our business. And so, I identify as a creative leadership consultant, an interdisciplinary artist, educator, and truth teller leading a peaceful revolution. I really believe that there are a lot of there are a lot of harmful patterns that we all see happening, not only in business, but in our social interactions and our society at large. And we can name it in a number of different ways, including white supremacy and capitalism and institutionalized racism and homophobia. But really, they all come down to how we are together. What does our culture look like? And that's really the work that I'm interested in looking at from a cultural perspective of how we're being with each other and how we're treating each other. So before we really jump into the information, I want to take a moment to get grounded and present. And you might not be expecting this, but I'm going to invite you all to join me in some movement and a deep breath. So what I want you to do is, whether you want to stand or stay seated, I mean, we've been in front of our computers already all day, and that might be a lot of what we have left. And we've been just kind of looking at the screen. I want us to get present in our bodies, and I want us to get grounded so we can get out of our minds and really start to do the inner work. So whether you're standing or whether you're seated, find the connection to the ground. So that might be through your feet flat on the ground. That might be through feeling your sit bones in your chair and really feeling the ground supporting you, the earth supporting you. And stack your vertebrae on top of one another. Grow your spine tall so you feel like there's a string pulling at the top of your crown, pulling you up towards the ceiling, like your head could reach the ceiling. And take a moment here and just notice your breath. And notice what sensations you feel in your body. They might be nuanced, small sensations of your breath coming in and out of your body, or maybe aches and pains in different parts of your body. And I want you to draw your nose down towards your chest and then up towards the ceiling. And draw a line up and down with your nose, putting a stretch into your neck. And then come back to neutral and draw it side to side, drawing a line in front of your head, in front of your face. Moving your head from shoulder to shoulder. And then come back to neutral. And then find a big circle, stretching your neck as far as you can to each direction, drawing a big circle with your nose. Really stretching your neck as far as you can without it causing any pain. And then go in the other direction. Just notice what you're feeling in your neck. Are you hearing any crunches, or you feeling like, ooh, that's a really good spot? If you find a good spot, maybe stay there for a second, like roll back and forth a little bit, or just feel it out. And then when you're ready, you can come back to a neutral position and start to roll your shoulders back. Big circles, roll and fold forward. Stretch your hands down to reach towards your toes. You might not touch your toes, but you can see if you can touch your toes. You can round out your back and give it a good stretch here. And then on the other side, you can roll back up straight and press out your chest and open up with your arms behind you, or put your arms on your hips maybe. And then rock your whole body kind of right to left at your torso. Maybe you even want to stretch an arm over. Give it a good reach on either side. Kind of just wiggle your fingers maybe. Maybe your wrists need to go into some circles. And just notice if there are any other parts of your body you want to move right now. Maybe you need to push up onto your toes, or go in ankle circles, or scrunch your toes. Come back into your body. And then as you start to feel like you've gotten all the little bits and pieces, come back to that straight up and down. And I invite you to either close your eyes here or look down in front of you and take a moment with yourself and notice your breath again. And take a moment to recognize any of those sensations in your body. Notice if the ones you noticed before are still there, or if there's new ones, or if they've gone away. And be present with your breath. Pay attention to the rhythm that it's taking without forcing it. Consider the way your breath recycles in and out of your body. How easy that is for your body to do, how natural it is, and how yet it's unique to you. It makes you, you. But it connects you with everything else that breathes, from all the people around us, to the animals and the plants. And how we each do our part by simply letting ourselves be. When you're ready, start to come back to the space. You might bat your eyes open. When you're looking at the screen, take a moment to look at everybody else here and notice all the beautiful faces that we have with us today, lots of community, and lots of other individuals that we get to share space with, that we get to breathe with. All right. So I wanted to share a little bit about my story and, what brought me to be doing this work. So as I mentioned, I'm in Amherst, Massachusetts. Well, I'm actually right outside of Amherst, Massachusetts, up in the woods. And I grew up here. And it is a very interesting community because it is home to some major universities and colleges, and at the same time is a very small rural space. And so that affects us both in our economy as well as our culture and the way that we are interacting with each other, like the demographic as well. So we have a lot of segregation in our community, where we have affluent folks, especially mostly affluent white folks, who are often, older and maybe like working within the universities that have like a really good financial situation and are, I feel like they have access to everything that they need, because they do. They have access to everything that they need. Whereas we have other parts of our community that are in, apartment complexes and are often are folks of color who are either, we have a lot of like Asian community. We have some Black folks too, and some Latinx folks as well. And so I grew up in a really white area because I grew up outside of the main town, up in the hill town. And I also grew up with my white mother here, right? And so I had a very I didn't have any connection to the Black community in my hometown. At the same time, the area, because of the way it's set up, is with the universities, really identifies as being progressive and forward thinking and inclusive and diverse. But as you can see, like, that's not the way that it's actually set up, and it's not the way that people experience it. So I was a very confused person when I came out of my 130 person school, like from kindergarten to 6th grade, we had 130 people, one class per grade, So I was with the same 24 kids my whole upbringing. And then I went into the middle school and I was like, wow, look, there's like other people of color who live around here. I had no idea. Like I thought I was like one of the only ones, and there's a whole community here. But it was really difficult for me to navigate being a part of that community that I wasn't really being introduced to, and I didn't feel like I belonged to. I didn't feel like I fit into. Whereas I didn't fit into the community that I came from either, which, was all my white friends, which were not really my friends because they didn't treat me well. So all of this to say that my experience being mixed race, as well as, growing up with my white mother, made it a very interesting dynamic for me growing up in Amherst, because I saw things in a very different perspective, I think. And I did a lot of work. Like I ended up finding my community, I found my community, and I had like a community of people who were wildly diverse. And that we often did work in social justice and theater and advocacy and things of that sort. So I actually gained a really good understanding of the way that our society is structured, and understanding the concept of race as a social construct at a very young age, and other social norms as a social construct as well, like gender and things of that sort. So once I ended up coming back into the area after, I went to college and all of that stuff, I ended up coming back and hearing about the co-op. And I had some folks who were really excited about me joining into the co-op and being a part of this. And they were like, we have this mission that is, to end structural racism. And we think that this is going to be, like a project that you're going to really love. And like, we want to do a cultural center and all these different things. And I was like, wow, that sounds amazing. Like, it sounds like what our community needs. Like we have a lack of programs and organizations right now, which is different than when I was growing up. And so I finally ended up joining in, and I noticed that the way that the co-op was speaking about the vision was different than how it looked like things were kind of functioning. And when I looked at I looked at what was our vision and our mission, and I felt like I was the only person who was sitting in the room who had been like, who had grown up here or who had like ties like that were deep to the community. I was the only Black person on the board. There was like a lot of different things about the way that my identity and who I was and my story that was showing up, that was giving me a perspective that wasn't being represented on the board. And I was surprised to see that we didn't have a huge member owner base of names that I recognize. Cause like I said, it's a small town, you know? And so I know a lot of the families growing up here. And so it really became a pain for me. Like it became, you know, it became hurtful to be in this room and working on this project that had to do with, you know, nourishing my community, when I felt like I had this whole perspective and this whole story of who I am and why this co-op means so much to me, of wanting to bring the community together and wanting to really, you know, make an impact that's meaningful to my community. And I was seeing that the culture that I knew of my community, of the town, was just being reflected right back into the co-op. And it wasn't being clear that there was a difference between what we were saying we wanted to do and what we were actually accomplishing. And it was also like, you know, a lot of the other folks on the board were like, either had, you know, most of them were farther along in their careers or more established or had greater privileges than me, to the point that they were able to sustain themselves outside, like with volunteering for the board. And this was something that like I was so passionate about. And yet it was like really hard for me to show up and make sure that my family was okay at the same time, you know, financially. And this was something that was a huge topic that I talked about a lot with folks individually at the co-op last year. I mean, at the conference last year, was how do you sustain yourself in this work, you know? So there was a lot of different parts of who I am and how I show up in the world and how I present in the world, how I'm seen in the world, how we categorize ourselves in our identities, that were really impacting me in a way that I didn't feel comfortable talking about with my board. And I felt like weren't being addressed. And part of the reason I didn't feel comfortable talking about it was because I felt like it was only a problem for me. So that means that like, it's my problem or something, you know? So I remember coming to Up and Coming and being really upset because I was like, I want to do this. I love this idea, but I have to take off work to get here. I'm not getting paid for this. Like, I don't know if how does this align with my life's purpose and what I want to do with my life and who I am and the change that I want to make? Like, can I really make the impact I want to make on my community doing this work? So I really started to realize the way that my identity was playing a role in how I was showing up in the space differently than the other people who were on my board. So I want to take a moment to, just getting myself situated. I want to take a moment to talk about privilege versus target. So what am I even talking about? So what does it mean to have a privilege? Privilege is when you have some type of a benefit based off of a way that, like, something in your life, something that you have, or something that that is part of your identity, or how you are categorized by your identity, that gives you any type of benefit, right? So we probably are all familiar with the term white privilege. White privilege meaning not that you have, you know, a lot of money or a lot of wealth, right? White privilege meaning that you have certain benefits because of your white skin, right? You have different kinds of privileges if you have a lot of wealth. That doesn't mean that they always go together, right? So we have different parts of how we identify or how we are identified that either give us this benefit, this privilege, or it gives us a target. It puts a target on us, and it puts us in a place where we are actually being taken advantage of or in danger because of this way that we are categorized or identified. So things that you might, so what do I mean by like a category or identification? We can talk about this like in a really basic way. It gets more complex, but I'm really going to keep it simple. So we're talking race, whether or not you have citizenship, what your career might be, what your gender might be, or how you're seen within your gender and your race, right? Because these are things that we might not be able to fully tell. What your class is, whether or not you have education or what level of education you have, what are your different abilities, sexual orientation, age, weight, body type, relationships, and the list goes on. So what I would love is if, oh, and I meant to say this at the very beginning, but if you all have pen or something to write with and some paper, I'd love to do a quick activity. And so looking at this list, I want you to start thinking about how would you categorize, or how would you say that you are categorized? What is your different ways that people identify you in the world based off of these different privileges or targets? And first you can just write it down. You could say, and write it as a list. So just write, give yourself a couple of lines in between each one, and you can write, woman or man, or you can say non-binary if that's how you identify. But it would be worthwhile to say male presenting, right? In the same way that, or female presenting, in the same way that with race, you can say white or black, but you might say white presenting if you're a black person and have extremely light skin, And so these are different things that you can look at to kind of give an idea of what are some ways that you're being identified. What are some different ways that you're being categorized? What's your experience, your unique experience? And then as you start to feel complete with your list, really thinking about what are the different ways that you are categorized by your identity. Excuse me. I want you to go through the list and start to note which one of these things gives you a privilege and which one of these things makes you a target. And start to kind of label them and add a line or it doesn't have to be a full sentence, it doesn't need to be a complete sentence, but add some thoughts, jot some thoughts down about what kind of privilege you receive or what kind of target is made, or what is the thing that, what is the reason that that thing makes you a target? So I can give you an example. So for example, I am Black, so that makes me targeted by systemic racism, white supremacy, anti-Blackness. It also has made me targeted by tearing me from my cultural lineage because of the way that my ancestors were enslaved. And I can continue. I have privilege from from being mixed. And so I have privilege from systemic colorism. I'm given certain opportunities and access because of that. I am targeted by my queerness, or my queerness is targeted by systemic homophobia and toxic heteronormative culture. I'm a college graduated, so I have privilege of access to higher paying jobs and better quality jobs. So I want you to just take one moment to, can I read the list aloud? So you have race, citizenship, career, gender, and these are just some examples. I want you to really consider your own identity. What are different ways that you are identified by society? So I want to give you all a few minutes to take some time with this. So I'm going to give you, I'm going to say about 5 minutes right now, and take some time and just really reflect on what are the different ways that you're identified in society, and does that bring you a privilege or a target, and why? And what are the specific ways that you either receive benefits from that, a privilege from that, or there is a target on you for that? What do I mean by relationships? I just mean, for example, I could say that I'm a wife, and that might give me certain privileges in, my relationship, or in my relationship with the law and things of that sort. I would consider me being a wife a privilege because I have the privilege of getting married, you know? Oh, Nikki, thank you for sharing that. So I can read the rest of the list for you. Let's see. So race, citizenship, career, gender, class, education, different abilities, sexual orientation, age, weight or body type, relationships. And the only reason I didn't go through the whole list is because there's really so many different ones that you can kind of pull from. And I do want to think, I want to give you all an opportunity to name what comes to mind for you of what feels most relevant to you. So for example, you identifying as blind is totally one that is super relevant, like you said, and I think would be helpful to add to your list. And yes, there are some that kind of have a privilege and a target. And, you know, there's ones that I've written where I've noted both. Like this one feels like a privilege in this way, and it feels like a target in this way, because it can, depending on the context too, it can change. So as you start to wrap up these thoughts, I want you at the bottom to start writing in just a few thoughts or sentences. How does all of these different characteristics and experiences start to put you into a uniquely positioned space for the work that you want to do in your community or in your co-op? How does all the different parts of your identity and your experience, your privileges and your targets start to put you in a unique position to give a unique perspective as to what changes you want to see happen? Maybe there's ways that your privileges can help benefit you in the work that you want to do. Maybe there's parts of your privileges that might cause you blind spots or might not allow you to fully see the bigger picture, or that you would need another person's perspective to add to yours. And then same thing with the targets, right? Having a certain target might actually give you the benefit of being able to see something that another person cannot. So I'm gonna give you one more minute to start to put your thoughts together on that. And then I'm going to, yeah, primary language is another one. Thank you, Katie, that's great. I'm going to then put you all into some breakout rooms so you can share with each other how you feel that you're uniquely positioned. All right, so I'm going to put us into breakout rooms and go ahead and feel free to share with each other how you're, I mean, we only did this for a very short amount of time. And so I invite you all to reflect more on this, afterwards, because there's a lot to this piece. But I would like to invite you all to share with each other how you feel that you're uniquely positioned to make an impact in your community and on your co-op. And then we'll come back together, but and we'll have a chance to share in the larger group. So I'm only going to put us in the breakout rooms for just a few short minutes. So go ahead and feel free to do that now.
Kinga. Hi, this is Marilyn Butler. How are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
My little breakout group, we were so interested in talking to each other, we never got to the topic.
I have been in those breakout rooms a lot.
And I just saw something come up and said it was moving us out of our breakout rooms, and I was trying to say something and I clicked myself, and now I'm back with you.
Oh, I'm sorry. You didn't get to finish out with them. They're going
Right.
to close in 10 seconds. So
Right. That's
yeah.
So I did get some good information though.
Good. I'm glad.
Mhm.
Okay, it looks like we're all coming back. So I know it can get exciting in the breakout rooms and you're like, ooh, people talking. And sometimes you get carried away. But like I said, I only wanted to put us in there for a few minutes, and I want to invite folks, if anybody wants to or didn't get a chance to, share how you feel you are uniquely positioned. So I can share some more about myself, that being I'm one of the youngest people on my board as well. So in a lot of ways, I'm one of the youngest people. I have dyslexia and dyscalculia, and I am a very emotional or sensitive person. And so these different things combined together actually put me in a position where I often feel like my voice isn't fully heard the way that it deserves to be, because I'm not communicating in the way that most people deem as, professional or intellectual or intelligent. Even though I'm educated and I am intelligent, I just communicate in my own way and have that unique perspective. On the other hand, being somebody who is mixed, Black, queer, and identifies as a woman, I have a lot of unique perspectives that I can share on my board that nobody else can kind of come with. Like there are stories that I have and experiences that I have that that are rich, and super valuable and are needed in order to move along my community. So those are some of the things that I'm wanting you all to reflect on for yourselves. And I want to give an opportunity if a couple people want to share with the larger group how you feel like you're uniquely positioned to make an impact in your own community or co-op. So I guess if you want to, you could just raise your hand like this to make sure we're not interrupting anybody, and then go ahead and unmute, because there's not too many of us in here. So I saw Brene, I don't know how to say your name and I don't want to mess it up. Siobhan, and then Nikki. So Brene, why don't you go first? I also don't know if I'm saying your name correctly.
Yeah, it's Brienne. It's okay.
Brienne.
So what I was saying, I hit every single one of those, normative things that are in white culture. I'm married, I'm hetero, I'm professional, I'm a citizen. I mean, all that stuff. But what I feel is I grew up with a military family, so I traveled a lot. I lived in different countries. I speak different languages. Spanish is one that I speak pretty well. And my first white friend wasn't until I was 11 years old, and I went to a Black high school. So for me, I feel like I have been sort of, despite being part of this normative culture, I've very often felt like I was outside of it for a number of reasons. And so I totally get the fact that people have to first figure out what their own privilege is, but also really educate themselves. And that's where I'm hoping our board is really good about trying hard. They're very progressive. They're trying to figure out how to incorporate others, but I'm the only one who speaks Spanish, right? And we have a large Latino population in our town who we really want to be a part of our grocery store. and not very many of them are yet. You know, little by little they're trickling in. So it's a matter of, you know, figuring out what they want. So one of the things I've challenged people on my board to do is go to the Latino grocery store in Milwaukee that everybody in our town drives an hour to go grocery shopping to, because it's amazing. It's this lovely little place. But I think that those types of field trips and things need to happen so that we understand where that Venn diagram is, where we can overlap and figure out where everybody can feel a part of our co-op when it's finally built.
Awesome. Either of the two of you, feel free to unmute and share.
I'll go next. My name's Siobhan, and I was just talking with my group a few minutes ago about how, in going down that list, I felt like every category or every area I was privileged in, and in a way, I felt a sense of guilt, but then I kind of shifted it to think that you know, I'm using my privileges in all of these areas to do work and to uplift those who aren't or who don't share the same privileges as me. And so as a young woman, biracial woman with no kids, with a college education, with you know, I don't know, all these privileges in other areas, I think that, and also growing up in the area that I work in as the outreach coordinator for my co-op, I feel like I'm in a really good place to do the work to like bridge my community together through over food. Sorry, I'm starting to ramble, but basically my takeaway was just using privileges that I have to work with others who don't share the same as me.
Beautiful. Love that.
Okay, is it my turn?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's see if I'm unmuted, right?
You're
You can hear
muted.
me?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Yeah, I had a really long list of privileges as well. And I identify as blind, which can be confusing to a lot of people because I'm not completely blind. And when people think blind, they think completely blind.
Mm-hmm.
So I think people get confused by that. But I've noticed that within my home co-op and then further out within the co-op world, like up and coming and partnering with other people, that I'm always that person who just has empathy for other people with disabilities. A lot of times I can self-advocate or I can accommodate myself in different ways, but not everybody can do that. And disabled people make up like 24% of the population worldwide, but there's so much diversity within that group. So I'm always the one at my co-op that's like, is that video closed caption? Does this, do you have this as a screen reader friendly format and all that sort of thing? And I'm just learning to bring awareness to that more and more. And last year when I brought this topic up, I was really like shy and kind of embarrassed to bring it up, not because I'm embarrassed to be blind, but because I felt like there were bigger problems in the world. And somebody shared a really great sentiment with me that I hadn't heard before. And that is that equality is not a pie. So one group getting treated fairly doesn't take away from other groups being treated fairly too. So that encouraged me to speak up more and bring the topic up on a more regular basis.
Beautiful. Wow. Thank you all so much for sharing. I think it's important to note that, you know, advocates, most of us become advocates because we've experienced something ourselves, right? And so that's oftentimes where the speaking up comes from and the being able to be an advocate, and it's so needed. And so, you know, for me, the lesson here is that all of our perspectives are so unique. We're all uniquely positioned in our own ways. And it really is needed that we all share our unique perspectives and that we have multiple perspectives. Oh, I have a slide for this. So here we go. So yeah, we need multiple perspectives. It's necessary. Your personal identity and experience puts you in a unique position and informs your perspective and understanding of everything, of community, society, politics, governance. Everything that we know and experience in the world is coming from your own unique perspective and your own unique position of how you experience things and how you see things. And that's why we need multiple perspectives, because you might not be able to always see something that somebody else can see. And we need each person to be able to speak up about what their own experience is and how that's bringing something to the table. And that's not going to be able to do anything if we don't have all of the multiple perspectives in one room. So it's really important to recognize what are the ways that your own identity is putting you in a position that's unique and can support your co-op. And then also, where is the balance? Like, what's missing? Do we need to bring in folks from other unique perspectives that's missing in our community that might be represented in the community at large, but it's not represented within the co-op? If our board and our leadership is not matching what our community at large looks like, then we're actually missing out on really important, rich information that's coming from people who themselves have experienced it. And life experience is invaluable. And so when people are talking about their own experience and how that shows up in the work that you're doing within the co-op, that's such an important thing to pay attention to and to take as it is without questioning it. So that doesn't mean bring in people from different backgrounds and then continue the work as you're doing it. If you're going to bring in leadership from, if you're going to bring in like Black leadership or BIPOC leadership or leadership from different abilities, leadership from different classes, leadership from different experiences, it's vital, that you actually listen to what they're saying and trust it as truth. I can't stress that enough. Listen to what they're saying and trust it, because you can't deny somebody else's truth. You can't deny somebody else's experience. And we need to trust that we're all coming, doing the best that we can, being the most genuine and honest that we can to do the best for our community that we can. So, I think it's important to look at our own implicit bias and to be able to understand where we are maybe questioning different folks because of the biases that we have in our own experiences, our own past experiences, our own conditioning, our own indoctrination. And make sure that we have leadership roles filled by marginalized folks in all different areas, and make sure that we're listening to them. If you're just bringing someone in just to tick the box of having somebody from that, background, that's tokenism. That's not what we're talking about, right? We're bringing them in to actually value their experience. And so in my co-op, one of the things we're really looking at is how can we give stipends to folks who have certain areas who are identifying in ways that bring targets upon them, so that we can even out, the accessibility of being on the board. What kinds of conversations need to happen in your own co-op that you can have access to people of different backgrounds. Maybe there is something that's actually bringing up a barrier that will not allow them to actually participate and join in leadership in that way. I think those are really important conversations to have. And so that brings me to my next share, which is, so I talked a little bit about how I came to Up and Coming just hurt and frustrated last year, because I was like, how am I supposed to make impact on my community while I feel like I'm suffering right now, and I'm like, I feel like my voice isn't valued, I feel like my board tells me they value me, like they want to value me, but like in actuality and in practice, like I'm saying things and they're not it's not always making it through to the other side, you know? And so like that comes back to the whole intent, and me, like you can intend to mean well, but that's where your implicit bias comes in as to, are there things that are blocking you from really seeing each other and taking what each other are saying at face value? And I was frustrated because I was like, I don't know how I can afford to keep going on with this project. I don't even know, how does this match up with my life's purpose? And I started to notice at Up and Coming, the conversations that we're having were really starting to help me bring up the right questions about culture, you know, like what is really happening in the culture of my community and in the culture of my co-op that's making me feel this way? Like, why do I feel so, you know, annoyed and burnt out and tired and frustrated? And like, why is this not fun? Like, why is this not, you know, like, I know it's work, but like, it should be fun. And I started to really look at the culture that was happening and whether or not, you know, these were conversations that we were really having. I was like, okay, maybe we've touched on this a little bit, but you know, are we really talking about it? And the more I thought about it, the more I realized, no, we're not, because I'm scared to even think about bringing it up to them. You know, like, you know, when you start to like get that fear of talking about it, then you realize like, no, we aren't really talking about it, because there's some things I think I really need to say. And, you know, the things we don't want to say are often the things that need to be said, right? They're like, that is all the under the rug kind of, you know, dirt that just builds up after all the years. And it's like, it's uncomfortable, and you're gonna have to like go down this whole web of lots of different things, and it's a little bit overwhelming. Like, and I've had board members say to me, the social, like, this is hard to talk about in social settings. I had board members say that to me, because what happened is I came back to the board after Up and Coming, and I was like, I have some things to say. I feel like I have some things to say, and we need to talk about some stuff. And it was a lot for me. You know, I shared with you all before, I'm sensitive. So like, I get really worked up. So I had to take some time and like write it down. And I think that's a good idea to do when you have a lot of thoughts and you have like something important you want to say to somebody, or something that could create, you know, some tension. I really wanted to think through everything that I had to say. So I sat down and I wrote down a whole letter of like all of what was not working for me and felt toxic or dysfunctional, or, you know, like was really difficult for me to show up on the board. And I was like, I just don't know how I can continue, you know, doing the project like this. But then I also said, it doesn't match the values and the vision and the mission that we've talked about. Like, I'm with the co-op because like, this makes sense to me, but what we're actually doing feels different than that. So like, let's talk about that. And that opened up a whole can of worms, a whole bunch of conversation that our board had to go through, really talking through like, what is happening in the culture of our board? What's happening in the culture of our co-op? How did it get to this point? What's the history and the timeline of all the things we've been through that got us to this point? And what are where can we pinpoint like the moments or the patterns or the habits, like the tangible moments that are causing our culture to be this way? And so we had some conversations like this on Zoom. We had some reflecting on questions together and kind of conversing back and forth on a Google thing. And a lot of similar themes came up. And if you were watching the story of ours that we just did, the session before this, you might be familiar with this whole story. But it's interesting how much things came up, like burnout and feeling silenced and useless, of fear, people being like, I don't know what's going to happen to the co-op, and so I have to do this because if I don't do it, then the whole co-op's going to fail. Or like, I have all of these talents and skills, but you know, no one ever asked me to do anything with them. And you know, the leadership that we had before, like never really like invited me to do those things. I always, they did those things. So I wasn't able to really use my talent, my unique skill, or people being like, I just have so much going on in my life. I can't give enough time, but I feel like I have to be here. And it's like, but you don't, like we would love you to be here. But if you're so burnt out and tired and feeling useless and feeling like bitter about being here, are you really serving the co-op? If the co-op's not serving you, how are you possibly serving the co-op? And so this ended up being a conversation about culture and what it does. And so, okay. So then the question is like, what do I mean when I say culture? So culture, I think, rather than giving you like a Webster dictionary definition, culture to me is the way we are with each other, the way we act with each other, the way we do things, the way we are, right? How what are the patterns that we have? What are the behaviors that we have? What are the systems that we have? What are the ways we treat each other? And so for me, I think it's really important to look at what's going on in the culture of your community and in your co-op, because whatever's happening in your community is going to happen in your co-op. Whatever happens in your co-op is going to happen in your community. They're connected. Okay. So I want you to go back to your piece of paper and take a moment and reflect on your community, your larger community, what the town or the area that your co-op is located in. And I want you to just jot down some words or thoughts about how do you see your community? What are some like descriptors of how you see your community? Like I already described, my community likes to think they're progressive, but there's a lot of gaslighting that's involved there, right? So like that might be one way that I describe how I see my community. And I also want you to reflect on how has your community been described to you by other people, because you have your own unique perspective, how you see the community, but then there are other people who see it differently, who you might have heard some people describe it in different ways. And as well as reflect on what is the goal? What are you trying to move towards in your community? So just take a couple of moments to reflect on, and you can just jot down a few words for each one. And once you feel like you've been able to reflect on your community, I want you to think about your co-op, specifically your co-op culture. How do you experience your co-op culture? And be honest, nobody else has to see these notes but you. I know it's hard to it's like your board members, they're like your teammates, but that doesn't mean that we're all on the same page. And that was one of the things I came to my board with. I was like, I'm not blaming anybody. Nobody created this culture by themselves. Like we did this as a team. So how did we get here, right? So how do you feel on your own co-op culture, in your own co-op culture? How do you experience it? And what are other ways you've heard it described? And what's the goal? And that might be like your goal, but it also might be like, what is the goal that your co-op has stated? We go back to the mission and the vision and the values. What is the goal that we're working towards? You said, yes, we're on the same team, but does not always seem to row in the same direction. And that's absolutely true. And that's why we have to have these conversations about culture, because people think that culture is just a thing that exists and you don't really have control over it. But culture happens intentionally. but we'll get to that in just a moment. So as you look at lots of things to discuss with this group afterwards. And yeah, I mean, I know we can connect on like the chat at least to connect further and maybe exchange more information, but I'm not sure either about further. I feel I don't know what culture is when we talk about our communities. Okay, so again, I'll say, to me, culture is the way we act with each other, the way we treat each other, the way we do things, you know, the way we handle situations, the way we look at dynamics, or the way we overcome challenges, the way we celebrate accomplishments, you know, the way, whether or not we talk about stuff, you know, it's, yeah. And that's why, to me, it is about how we are with each other. And I know that sounds like a very blanket and open statement, but that's what culture is. It's how we act with each other, how we are with each other. And so that's why I give the example of, in my community, the thing that I feel like is most prevalent for me is that we state to be diverse, inclusive, progressive, and we pride ourselves on that. You know, like there's a saying in Amherst where only the H is silent, because it's not Amherst, it's Amherst, right? So they made it into like a little joke where only the H is silent, because we're so outspoken about everything, but there is so much that goes unspoken. So to me, that's a huge part about how I experience the culture in my community, is that we claim to talk about things and be progressive, but there's a lot of people who are in a lot of pain and suffering, and we're not talking about it. So here, the lesson is for me that our culture is passed down. Culture in general is passed down, and harmful patterns will continue until we're intentional about making a change. So it's important to take time to have honest and straightforward conversation amongst your board and look closely at the culture of both your community and your co-op. And again, the reason I say both your community and your co-op is because if culture is passed down, your co-op is going to, by nature, start to take on the culture of your community, right? It's going to just be a reflection of it. Just by nature, it doesn't, you don't have to do anything, you have to try. It just happens. And you have to be intentional about redirecting or changing the culture that's happening in your co-op. And by doing that, you're going to actually make an impact on your community and start changing the culture of your community, because you're going to create something so amazing that people want to be a part of and that they want to spread. They want to spread that energy. And that's really how culture works. It's the same thing when we talk about family dynamics and family tradition, family culture. You know, you take on the culture of your family and the patterns of your family, and people will call the generational curses of your family, until you intentionally stop it, until you intentionally say, I'm not going to do that anymore. We're going to start doing this. And so how do we do this intentionally? I would say it's really important to start reviewing the culture and the structure of your co-op and identify what's missing and what needs to be adjusted. Like, what is out there that's showing you what the culture is? And are there pieces that are missing or that you need to start adding to? So for example, community agreements. You might call this your expectations or your governance documents or, you know, accountability agreements. There's so many different ways that you can start to put into words intentionally how you desire to be together, how you desire to work together. What does your workload look like? How do you divvy up work? What are the expectations amongst the board, right? How do we expect to go about the work together? And so this goes back to why I shared with you all at the beginning of the session, the things that are going on in my life, because how we start to undo harmful patterns. And we talked about, you know, briefly, I mentioned when I'm talking about harmful patterns, what am I talking about? Well, the structures that are happening within our greater society that are causing harm to all people, like capitalism, right? And so capitalism says that we need to push through work no matter what happens or how you're feeling. And you don't have to, you don't want to bring up personal stuff in a professional situation. But I say no. I'm going to come into the space. I'm going to let you all know, like, look, it took a lot of energy for me to show up today. There's a lot going on for me. And I really appreciate you all taking the space to hear me in that. And now I feel like, you know, connected to you. Like, I feel like you're holding me. Like, I feel like if I stumble, you all will understand why. And so writing these types of things into your governance, I think, is really important to be able to identify, like, okay, what is our expectation for each other when we get to work? And then where do we bring in the humanity? How do we balance those two things out? How do we write that into the way that we are functioning so that it's never lost? So that at no point in the development of our co-op does that piece of humanity get taken away by productivity and forward momentum. Another piece is communication. How are we communicating with each other? Like, what language do we want to use to communicate with each other? What language do we want to use to communicate with our community? And what means do we use to communicate with each other? Like, what are the expectations around communicating? And when do we communicate? Where? For how long? You know, things that help people actually find a boundary, like a guideline of where we expect each other to fit in. And then also, where are we allowed to take a step out every once in a while if that's what's needed? How do we keep each other accountable while also seeing each other for the humans that we are, with the unique circumstances and conditions that come with our everyday lives? And I think this is important to look at also with your marketing materials, the way that you're writing up your copy and your language to your community as well, your transparency in the board, right? Like, with whatever's happening within the board, keeping that transparent within your community as well as transparent with each other. That doesn't mean you have to share your whole life story with each other, everything that's going on. I mean, you have your own boundaries, you know, you decide what you share and what you don't. But to create a culture where that's like comfortable, you know, that's needed, so that we don't get the sweats when we're like, oh my God, I have to talk to my board about something. This is going to be uncomfortable. This is going to be awkward because I have some things to say. You create a community, a culture in which the norm is saying something. And when we're not saying something, we're not holding the culture that we really want to have, right? We're not going to hold back from saying something because we're afraid to hurt each other or to upset each other. You know, we're going to say it because that's how you overcome in community, is through conflict, you know? And then finally, connection. And connection for me too is, like, again, not only connection with your community in creating meaningful and an authentic connection that's not just about, you know, gaining member ownership and telling them about the co-op, but like checking in with them and seeing how they're doing and what they need, you know, and then doing the same thing with your board. So we started a habit of checking in on a regular basis in our board meetings, both on a personal level and on a professional level. Okay, so everyone gets to say how they're doing today, and then everyone gets to tell us what they got done this week, okay, or the last couple of weeks. And then if we have something big we need to discuss together, we'll do that. But we need to be able to check in with each other, because that's the only part that comes with like the human interaction. The rest of the work we can do separately, you know, for the most part, you know, like at our own time. But when we come together, we need to be in human relationship. And it reminds me of actually, well, it's what I just had another thought, but it brings back the idea of you know, I lost my thought, but I feel like that's okay. That happened. Checking in on a regular basis to make sure that everybody is okay. I think that this is a really important part, of being in community. And this is going to say, thanks for catching me back. I got it. The board is the center, right? So when I say the community impacts how the co-op is, the co-op impacts how the community is. Where is the culture coming from in the co-op? It's coming from the board. So if you in your board are having any type of dysfunctional workspace or ways of being, or unable to talk about things, or people feeling frustrated and burnt out, do not think for a second that that will not infiltrate into your co-op and into your community. Like that, if there's nothing else that I can have you take away for today, it's that your board has to be feeling like a comfortable place that you want to be. You want to show up to the board meetings. You have to want to communicate with your board members, because when we're in a space of discomfort or toxicity or dysfunction just within the board, that's going to then grow out into your greater co-op community. And you really want to avoid doing that. So I want to ask you all, what else do you feel like, I'm going to give you all a chance again to unmute and share. What else do you feel like are some things maybe that came up for you as we talk about all of these topics that feel like, you know, might be a good thing that you can get started with to be intentional about shifting the culture of your own board. And so you might have a thought, something might have come up while we were talking, or while I was talking, of what could be a good intentional place to start. And if you don't have a thought on that, if you have any takeaways or questions that you want to share. Stuart, did I see your hand?
I did, but I didn't want to take the floor from the other participants. I just real quickly, my own board would really benefit a lot from the checking in part. We try to make our business meetings very business-like, and they're almost all virtual. So we really do miss that human contact part. Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, I see Damon and Janine. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the check-in is really, really important. That's the concept that I got in, because we've been on virtual for all this time, for this whole year, with virtual meetings. And there's not that before, when we have board meetings and everything, you know, there's a back talk, or you know, we spend time afterwards, after the board meeting, kind of catching up what's going on in life. Now it's on virtual, we're on there, time, it's off. So some of the board members that have come on since, you know, during the pandemic, we don't have that kind of connection. We haven't had coffee together. We haven't sat down and just you know, talked about life together. So even though I know them, most of them, but it hasn't gotten to that personal level to where you feel like a cohesive family as of yet. Even though, but we're getting a lot of good work done, but still, there's that piece that's missing. And I think sometimes I feel like they may be missing out on some of the things that are going on because of it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, Janine, am I saying your name correctly?
Yes, thank you. First of all, this has been incredible. And it has brought, I've been scribbling notes, this whole time because I have so many things that I want to continue the conversation. I could be here till 1, talking with people. We have, a mostly white board. We have one person of color on the board, and yet our community, there is no majority. It's like 20%, 20%, 20%, 20%, which is wonderful, which is part of the reason why I like our community, but our board is not reflecting that. And I guess what I sense as a dilemma is including more people of color, more diverse gender people, and so on, with a very white presenting board. How does that not come across as tokenism? I mean, I feel very passionate about it. And I'm not sure how passionate some of the other board members are about it. I need to find that out. Definitely. And yeah, so that's kind of the question. It's, obviously we don't want to be like, oh, you're Latinx, perfect. Horrible. So, yeah, there's that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and it's a really tricky subject. And that's why I go back to saying, the best I can say, I think in this moment right now, is that tokenism is absolutely going to come up if you are only looking for people because they fill a certain demographic, right? I think for me, what's important is putting emphasis on the value that that person brings with their perspective and their knowledge of their own lived experience. And and so for us, on our board or in our co-op, we started to shift we actually created a fully sponsored share for BIPOC individuals, because we were like, it would be a gift for you actually to be a member of our co-op, like a member owner. It would benefit us so much that we actually don't want your money. We want your presence and your voice, and instead we'll ask for other folks to fund for your share. And that's the same concept that I want to bring in when it comes to board members and giving compensation, because there's some things that are just so invaluable and we need your voice. We need your perspective, and then that's also when I go back to saying, listen and be aware of that. Like, be aware of the tokenism after you bring the person in too. Don't just be like, oh, I don't, okay, now we have them and that's great. You have to be fully engaged and trusting in what they're sharing is their own lived experience, because otherwise it absolutely is tokenism. Like, oh, we have this person on the board and it's great, they represent this spot. But, our board, and this is part of why I share for my board, it became an issue that I realized is like, you all elected me to be your board president, but then when I'm saying that these are things that need to get done, they're not getting done. Why is that? Let's have a real conversation about who I am and how I present on this board. And if that's, in your own implicit bias, making a difference, because I'm the young Black woman in the room, the only one, and I'm saying these are the things that need to get done. Are you trusting that I actually know where I'm taking this project? Are you trusting that, in my leadership that you said that you trust in? So if you're going to bring people onto your board, you have to trust their expertise in their own personal experience and their own personal perspective,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I hear you. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And so I recognize we could do if anybody wants to do like a a private meeting, we could try to schedule something of that sort if you want to continue on in this conversation together, either as a small group, or I'm not exactly sure how those work, but yeah, I know that we're out of time now. The meeting room should be open for just a few more minutes if anybody has any further lingering thoughts or questions. And other than that, where's my, I'm going back and forth with these slides. So other than that, I just want to share with you all, thank you for your time. And if you do have any further questions for me, or you want to engage further with me beyond today, you can contact me for more information on co-op stuff at our bod@commonsharefood.coop email. Or if you're interested in connecting with me more on culture shifting in general, you can contact me at countercultureeducator@gmail.com. Be happy to engage with you all further. And I appreciate you all in your presence.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful.
Thank
It was really good. Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah. Oh,
Outstanding.
and I'll add to the check-in, Damon, because you mentioned it. The check-in that we do, that we've started to just normalize like a pattern every time we come into the board meeting. And there's like a number of different prompts that we each answer. And so it's become a pattern. It's like a habit now. So it's inside of our meeting, you know, it's a part of our meeting. We come in and we share something that we're grateful for, or something that, you know, we did like a culture share of something that we've experienced this past week or something of that sort. And we end the meeting on the same note. We share something that is bringing us joy in the moment, you know?
Yeah, I can understand that. It's been such a tough year, you know, it's a really tough year. And a lot of our board members, they have businesses and everything else. And, you know, I'm a first responder. So it was a lot of pressure packed, you know, stuff going on in the background this past year, you know, other than the co-op.
Right.
So.
Yep. Absolutely. Oh, can I post the email info again? Yeah, I can do that. Here, I can also put it in the chat. Oh, just kidding. I'm struggling to do that. So here's the slide. Thank you. I appreciate you all joining today. Oh, I'm just switching around. I forgot my screen was shared. Did you all get you all got the emails? Okay.
Thanks again. Bye-bye. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you. You too. Take care.
Thank you. It was awesome.
Yeah, early.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Came in halfway through it, but because we had a call, but hey, what I did was able to get in. It was good.
Oh, good. Maybe you can catch the replay at the beginning.
I will. I'll try to catch the replay and see what's going on at the beginning.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah,
very much.
of course.
Very cool. All right.